Hey, what's up guys, Matt Shiny here, come back with a brand new video. If you guys know, if you've watched my channel for a while, you know I really don't talk about what we're specifically going to talk about today, but it might be a better investment than I'm giving it credit for. Let's hop on into it. Now, I usually don't talk about knives for investment purposes. In my opinion, knives usually end up with a lower return than what is ideal, and honestly, they're a lot of money to put into one specific thing, whereas with cases, at least with most cases, you can pick up hundreds of them for maybe $100, but with a knife, that's not even going to get you a decent quality knife. Therefore, I usually stay away from it unless you're looking for a play skin purpose, which is definitely a very valid reason, but personally, it's just not for me. Now, just over a year ago, I created a video talking about investing into knives, and the video is not super in-depth. Basically, I just take the 1 year before price and compare it to the current price, and we talk about what's the best percentage gain. Now, the percentages ended up with a decently high percentage with the butterfly and the karambit and the bayonet on top. This is the entire list. It doesn't give you specifics, and if you want specifics, you can check out that video, but basically the bottom of the list here or the end of the video are the more profitable ones, and then the top is going to be, there was even a couple in the negatives. Now, why am I bringing all of this up? Well, recently I came across a Twitter thread that really piqued my interest. It was talking about the stiletto knives, and more interestingly, the stiletto marble fade, which is not something that particularly seems that interesting. It's not like a very avid knife you see in the community, but it went up pretty quickly. And if you look at this graph here in the tweet by Rambo Fight, you can see just how significantly it went up. And if we want to head over to Buff, you can see everything in English, and you can also see how it kind of came back a little bit now. Obviously, that is a very large peak, considering that peak went from around $320 to a peak of $400, which is a 25% increase. And in knives terms, that's absolutely crazy. That's about the average, I would say, of what I saw in my video over the span of an entire year. So the fact that that's happening in just a couple days is absolutely crazy. But you can see it drop back down slightly, but it's still sitting at a very elevated price looking at the month graph here. Now, there's also another person I follow on Twitter by the name of Cantry, and Cantry has a lot of great websites. Specifically, he's got the Cattle 14 tracker, which is probably the most notable thing he really does. But basically, he came out with a graph of these stiletto knives, and you can just see how crazy the peak is, considering that these knives were almost all flat or barely increasing. You can see here that it's just absolutely crazy how almost every single knife has seen that peak. Now, I could go on and on with more specific examples. I wanted to give you the one big one that stood out to me, but it comes down to the main question of, are knives good investments? Now, this is something I really avoid to answer, and honestly, if you watch the most of my videos, you'll notice I don't really talk about high tier items in general because it's very complex, and honestly, the dynamic is significantly different than when we're talking about cheaper items. When we're talking about cheaper items, there's usually a status or like kind of a formula that everything follows. When we're talking about high tier items, for me, obviously everything could just slowly increase, and that's definitely a possibility, but for me, I don't like investing into high tier items. I think there's definitely at some point a cap of saying, why would I buy a $2,000 skin when I could buy a $1,000 one? Save 50% of the money, and it's still a very high tier skin. That's the main reason why I avoid high tier items, because I like to look for practicality. It's the reason that the majority of my investments are in cases, because I can see this item practically going up. Most of the items on the Steam market you could invest into, but they're probably not going to go up, or if they go up, it's not going to be for a right reason, if that makes sense. It's going to be that you got lucky rather than you made a smart decision, and that's why I avoid almost everything that's not a case or something consumable. I've definitely got a couple things that are not, but that's besides the point. The biggest thing here with knives is there's definitely going to be a lot of different places to go. I mean, there's just so many different options, and it's such a broad topic. It's like talking about skins in general, and I think people really group them together, especially knives, and it's very hard to determine because if we look at my past video, there was some knives that ended up losing 30% of their value, and there's some knives that ended up gaining 75%. It's such a wide variety of how knives could turn out. So you've decided that you want to invest into a knife. What's the best course of action to go through with it? Now, Now, I'll be honest, knives are not the area of my most expertise, but there's a couple basic rules that I personally follow, and I think they're definitely going to help you out. The first thing is I always prioritize the finish over the actual knife. If you're looking at potentially getting a battle-scarred bayonet boreal forest, or if you're looking at potentially getting something that's a little bit cheaper but in a very desirable finish, I think you're definitely going to be better off going with the thing that's got the better finish. It's going to be much easier to sell, and usually once you start getting into those battle-scarred or well-worn skins, your value is going to be very vague, and you might end up getting in a pretty iffy situation on even making money in general. Always try and go for like a field tested or a factory new knife, at least in my opinion. The biggest thing when it comes to investing into knives though is don't expect to make a significant amount of profit. Obviously, if you're going to pick up a knife, it should be for a gameplay purpose. The investment purpose could definitely be secondary, but I think investing into a knife for just an investment purpose is going to leave you very dissatisfied with how everything turns out. Most of these knives that we talked about, and even in my past video, the majority of them ended up within like 0 to a 20% increase in price, and that was a long time ago. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see now that those percentages could possibly have been toned down. So I think you're going to be in a pretty dissatisfied situation if you invest into a knife thinking that you're going to be getting a high ROI and it ends up being pretty slow, maybe double or triple what the actual inflation numbers are. It's definitely going to outpace inflation if you pick a reasonable knife, but it's probably not going to be as ideal as just an actual investment in general. And that leads me to something I used to talk about a lot. I don't really talk about it too much, but the thing is, not everything in CSGO you do has to be an investment. Obviously, it's very smart to make sure you're not going to lose money. It's like buying skins out of the recoil case is most likely not going to be your best option, but there's definitely that balance there. It's not like I'm telling you you can't buy those skins out of the recoil case. If that's something that's very desirable to you, don't let me or anyone else stop you. It's a game, it's cosmetics, it's meant for entertainment for the most part. Definitely make sure you know exactly what you're doing, but don't let someone's opinion stop you from getting the skins you want. Just because something's not a great investment doesn't mean it's not going to provide value to you, and I think that's something so many people are starting to overlook once again as the market starts to increase for the majority of items. If you want to look back a year, almost everything case-wise is up, and skins could be relatively similar, so they'll sell off all their skins and invest into cases. That's perfectly fine to do, but just make sure you have that balance there where you're still enjoying the game, you still have skins that you like in the game, especially if you're someone that plays the game very often. But that is really all I have for today, guys. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.